you want, you can look.
Turn around.
Yeah, you can turn around when you want.
Oh my god.
Hey everyone, I'm Tim, and I've just finished a 9-month odyssey around Latin America. Now I'm reopening my diaries, and this time I'm bringing you along with me. Week by week, country by country, all the colors, all the craziness, all the food, all the music, and all the splendor. 9 months when each morning was a new adventure. The road was my companion, and Latin America cast its spell on me. This is my Latin America Diaries. Welcome back to my Latin America Diaries. I left Eje Cafetero towards Bogotá by bus. Now, a lot of people that I've told in Colombia about this journey thought that it was quite strange because Colombia has a very developed aviation network. And the reason for that is basically pure necessity. Colombia is a very mountainous country, straddling the Andes Mountains as it does. And as such, even 300 or 400 kilometer journeys by road often take up to 10 or 12 hours. And naturally, the aviation sector has jumped in and filled the gap. Now, in the tradition of many countries that have two major dominant cities, there is a friendly and sometimes not so friendly rivalry between Bogotá and Medellín. So, of course, everyone wanted to know which city I found more interesting and which I preferred. And I have to tell you that the answer to this, for me, is quite controversial, and I will be telling you about that right after this. Make sure that you like this video, subscribe, and please hit the bell icon to make sure that you are notified whenever I upload new videos from this series. And if you like what you're seeing, even if the answer depends on my preference between Bogotá or Medellín, please share my content and tell your friends and family about this. It really helps me to grow my YouTube channel. When I left Alcalá in the Eje Cafetero, I jumped on a bus towards Armenia. However, that day the buses were only traveling as far as Quimbaya, the town where I had been for Candles Night. When I reached Quimbaya, I discovered that all of the town was still pretty much blocked off due to the festivities from the night before, and as such, the regular stopping point for the buses had changed. I walked around the town centre of Quimbaya at least twice with my luggage in search of the temporary bus stopping point, and people kept giving me directions to different places, and no one really seemed to know what was going on, and it was so hot. But eventually I did get onto a bus headed for Armenia, where I was staying in a hostel near the long-distance bus station. Now, I have to admit that Armenia was not my favorite place in Colombia. It was hit by a devastating earthquake about 30 years ago, and although 3 decades have passed, the city really still seems to be recovering from that terrible period. No doubt, my opinion of Armenia was also shaped by the fact that I was staying near the bus station, and bus stations or major train stations in any major city around the world generally aren't the nicest parts of the city. Anyway, I woke up early the next morning, and it was only a short walk to the bus station in Armenia, where I boarded my bus for the 10-hour journey towards the capital. Once I arrived in one of Bogotá's several bus stations, I jumped in an Uber and then headed to Javi's apartment. So my friend Javier that I was staying with in Medellín, he actually flew down to Medellín to meet me there, but he was living in Bogotá at the time. So I stayed there with him and his sister for about a week. And they gave me a very, very warm Colombian welcome. And that was very quickly followed with chaos of the most endearing kind. His mother was about to fly out of Bogotá, and so she headed to the airport, and I said hello and goodbye to her very quickly. And when she arrived at the airport, using a stranger's phone, she called Javi to say that she had actually left her cell phone in the apartment where we were staying. So we all piled into an Uber and then made our way to the airport to pass her the cell phone. And then Javi, his sister, and I all went out for a lovely meal afterwards. Now, here's something a bit unexpected. When I was in Eje Cafetero, the whole time that I was there, I was actually starting to feel very homesick. And I can't really put my finger on why. Maybe it was because I was at the 2.5-month mark of my journey. Maybe it was because I made such a human connection with such wonderful people there, but was repeatedly saying goodbye. Or maybe it was because I was traveling on my own in Colombia for the first time. I'm not sure, but whatever it was, it really hit me. And especially in places like Salento, I found myself sitting there over a cup of coffee and looking out at the rain and thinking about life in Lahore. However, when I arrived in Bogotá, my first night there, I was in contact with a friend of mine, Juliana, who took me out for a dinner at the iconic restaurant Andrés Carne de Res. We had this amazing dinner of contemporary Colombian cuisine, full of bold flavors and creative twists. And just like that, my travel energy came flooding back. Somehow Bogotá really revived me, although that was the first night and my first experience encountering the insane Bogotá traffic. And all of this leads me to say that Bogotá is my preferred city out of the Bogotá-Medellín rivalry. Yes, Medellín has the pop culture profile, it has the party scene, and that's what a lot of people really love about Medellín. And of course, there's a lot more to Medellín beyond that. However, I didn't really get to experience a lot of that when I was in Medellín. While I was in Bogotá, on the other hand, I really got to scratch the surface and spend a lot of time with a lot of close friends of mine who live and really breathe the life of Bogotá. And as a result, I think that that's why I found Bogotá probably a lot deeper and more interesting. Although I will absolutely confess to the fact that that is largely due to my experience in both cities. So if you'd like to add something to that conversation, please mention it down in the comments, but please don't come for me saying that I didn't really experience Medellín properly, because I know. As a result, though, I don't have tons of content to show you from Bogotá, because a lot of the time that I was spending in Bogotá was actually just moments with people. It wasn't so much things to see or do, although Bogotá has no shortage of them. However, there are lots of stories to tell. On one of my first days there, I went out with a friend, Carlos, and we took a long walk towards the city center. We wandered through La Candelaria, which is a historic neighborhood filled with colorful buildings and colonial charm, and eventually ended up downtown, where I got to try chicha, a traditional fermented drink that's been part of Bogotá's culture for centuries. So here I am tasting masato, and as you can see, I've already tasted a lot of it. It's basically this semi-fermented, it's probably not even fermented rice drink, and it's really nice actually. The other one, which I tried before, was intense. Didn't even realize that it had alcohol in it until after I tasted it. So, but the other one, chicha, I think it was really like sort of I don't know, bitter, I guess is the best way. Like really, I don't know, yeah, bitter, I would say. But this is really smooth. Then I caught up with an ex-student and also friend of mine, Bibiana, and she took me out to Mercado La Perseverancia to try ajiaco, which is one of Bogotá's most iconic dishes. Ajiaco is a thick, comforting soup made with chicken, potatoes, corn, and avocado. First time tasting ajiaco with Bibiana. It's very vegetable-y.
Yeah.
Actually, yeah. I like it. And it's just chicken, right?
It has 3 different potatoes.
Ah, and corn as well.
And corn.
Okay.
Yes, and chicken.
Interesting.
And rice right now.
This is delicious. Everything I've tasted so far in Bogotá has been really tasty. It's been really good.
We take acid every day.
I love it. To understand ajiaco, you really need to understand Bogotá, and that's because Bogotá sits high up in the Andes. It's a high altitude city. It's a rather serious, sometimes austere city, which really contrasts with the prevailing notion of Colombia as being this tropical, constantly partying Caribbean side country. Bogotá's not like that. The weather is constantly changing. It's cold a lot of the time, and a lot of my ex-students from Bogotá often say that Melbourne, Australia is not that strange for them because the weather really isn't that different to their hometown. As such, ajiaco really suits Bogotá perfectly because it's this warm, soothing, comforting food that really warms you up. After we went for ajiaco, then we took a walk through La Candelaria again, and this time stopping for some poses with some street art murals, and eventually ending the day with hot chocolates overlooking the gardens and the mountains. Continuing the theme of warm, hearty food, the next morning I went out for breakfast to meet a friend of mine, Mafe, who is also an ex-student of mine, and we went out to Florida Cafe to taste a Bogotá specialty, which is hot chocolate with cheese. Okay, so here we go. First time tasting chocolate con queso, which is basically hot chocolate with cheese in it, and this is something that I have been waiting to taste in for, like, I've been waiting for this in Bogotá because it is a very Bogotá thing, right? Like chocolate con queso. Colombian, but yeah, okay, here we go. I think I need to stir it up a bit. Oh, so you actually, so it doesn't dissolve, it's more like, okay, all right. Let me get some of this. Here we go, I'm learning, so here we go.
And then drink. You can chew it. That is queso campesino.
Queso campesino.
But you can also try it with queso doble crema.
Okay, and I guess that's a bit saltier or something, or?
That one is a little bit salty.
Actually, yeah. Just as I said that, I could like taste it. That's so good.
Actually, we can have
It's like a dessert. Okay, and now I've tasted pan de yuca, which is basically bread made from yuca. And this is really nice, and it's warm. I mean, I guess I don't know if they make it fresh or if they just warmed it up, but it's fresh. It's so good. It's kind of sweet and vegetable-y too, right? Like it's not like regular bread. It's so nice. Out on the street, we got to taste mamoncillo, one of many unique fruits that is endemic to Colombia. Another day, I also got to catch up with Camilo, another ex-student and now friend of mine. We went out for a Mexican dinner at a restaurant in the northern suburbs of Bogotá. And one day I went out for lunch with Jonathan, who took me out to a typical Colombian cafeteria. It's the kind of place that serves the hearty, affordable meals that many office workers around the city rely on for their midday break. It was simple food, nothing fancy, but delicious and very reflective of everyday life in Bogotá. You know, it's funny because the prevailing stereotype of Colombia really is one of like a tropical Caribbean country where people are dancing on the beach all day long. But a lot of Colombians don't live in hot weather climates. A lot of Colombians actually live high up in the mountains in places like Medellín, which is quite temperate, and Bogotá, that's actually chilly. And you know, it's that sort of speaks to how dynamic Colombia is as a country. As such, the food in Colombia is so different to everything else in the region. You know, it's not spicy like Mexican food. It relies a lot on sort of like locally grown vegetables. There's a lot of cheese, a lot of bread, a lot of filling, hearty food. And that's really at odds to what a lot of people, I think, imagine Colombian food to be like if they're not already aware. As such, Colombia, I think, really is in some ways like the quintessential Latin American country, but it's also so distinct as well. And that's something really, really interesting. The mountains that run through Colombia have also traditionally and historically divided the country so much. And as a result, different pockets of the country, different towns, different cities have really developed their own culture. So when you move from one part of the country to another, the culture, the cuisine, the accent, the attitudes, issues, mentality, everything changes. And so it's like traveling through lots of little countries within one greater one. And that's something that really stayed with me from Colombia. And I think that Bogotá is the perfect example of that. Other highlights of my time in Bogotá included continuing my arepa quest. This one where I got to taste arepa de choclo, which doesn't actually originate in Bogotá, but I found it there on the street. And I also tried another type of arepa from Bogotá, which is similar to the one in Medellín. It's quite plain, but it's eaten with cheese or other toppings, often for breakfast. Another thing that I got to do in Bogotá on one of my last mornings there was head up to Monserrate, which is a mountaintop cathedral that overlooks the city and is one of Bogotá's most iconic landmarks. From up here, you really get a sense of just how vast the city is. And it's a reminder that although Colombia has a Caribbean coast and the culture that many outsiders associate with the country is there, but the country's megacity, the heart of the nation, is actually high up in the Andes. From Monserrate, I could also see the Andes stretching far beyond that first line of mountains, giving a real sense of the immensity of this mountain range. While I was up there, it was only about 2 weeks before Christmas and there was a church service taking place. It reminded me once again of how important religion is to many Colombians. One of the wonderful things about being an English language teacher is the vast variety and number of students that you meet from different corners of the world, and the fact that you get to stay in touch afterwards. One example that really brought this into sharp focus for me was when I heard from Julie. Now, Julie was my student in Melbourne in Australia back in 2009, and we had been in touch distantly on social media ever since then. But when she saw that I was traveling in Colombia, Julie reached out to me and proposed, let's meet up when I get to Bogotá. So we did. We went out for several lovely meals while I was there, particularly in Zona T, which is a pleasant upmarket part of Bogotá. We even went shopping for a birthday cake so that I could celebrate my 40th birthday in Bogotá. I got a cake which was an interesting hybrid. It was basically made from almojábanas, which is a type of corn and cheese bread, and a bit of dulce de leche. One night we went out for birthday dinner and I invited Carlos, Stephanie, Javier, Juliana and Julie. And then on my last night in Bogotá, I went out with yet more of my ex-students, Laura and her partner Andre. They took me to an arepa place for dinner that serves arepas stuffed with pulled beef, yes please, and then a mountaintop lookout from where you can see the whole city at night. We tried a local drink, canelazo, which was the perfect end to my time in Bogotá. Then I took a bus out to the satellite city of Zipaquirá, where I would meet and stay with my friend Juan Pablo and his family. His family had prepared the house for Christmas as only a family who truly loves the season could, and it was just gorgeous. I don't think I've ever been in a house so meticulously organized for Christmas. It looked like the Christmas section of a fancy department store. It was so cute and perfectly done. Once in Zipaquirá, Juan set about taking me around the town. Zipaquirá is a mining town near Bogotá, close to the neighboring state of Boyaca, which I would visit next. While in Zipaquirá, I got to taste one of the arepas from Boyaca, which is filled with melting cheese. Delicious, and easily one of my favorite arepas from my arepa quest around Colombia. Then we walked through the main square and saw the cathedral, an impressive construction made out of stone. Afterwards, we went out for a bite to eat in the neighboring town of Chia, where I got to try cheese with guava paste, a true Colombian specialty. One thing I've noticed is that Colombians seem to enjoy pairing different flavors together that in theory shouldn't work, but often do. An example of that was also when we had breakfast the next morning, when we had changua, which is a soup made of milk, scallions, coriander, and eggs. And somehow it works. That night, Juan and I went out for a drink with another friend of his and then came back and stayed up late talking with his father, swapping stories and me trying my very best to be understood in Spanish. But without a doubt, the highlight of Zipaquirá was the town's salt mine cathedral. As I mentioned, Zipaquirá is a mining town, and there is a giant disused salt mine in the side of the mountain that overlooks the town. This mine has now been turned into a remarkable tourist attraction. The miners who once worked there transformed part of the mine into a cathedral, partly because they could, but also because working in an underground mine is, of course, incredibly dangerous, and faith played an important role in their lives. For these miners, having a cathedral in the mine was auspicious and offered a spiritual sense of protection while they carried out their very hazardous work. Today, visitors can walk through the mine and experience the cathedral, seeing all the stations of the cross, each represented as a niche carved into the walls, until finally reaching the main altar, which is breathtaking. Juan asked me to close my eyes and then walked me blindly up towards the viewing platform, where he then commanded me to open my eyes with the cathedral hall right in front of me, and it was revealed in all of its grandeur.
Yeah, you can turn around when you want.
Oh my god.
And that's the biggest cross that's underground in the world.
This was just mind-blowing. The lighting effects on the cathedral, the way it played across the walls, the sheer size and scale of the space, and the immense amount of work that went into creating it. It's also impressive, words almost fail me. Being underground like that, you really feel as if you've entered another world, another realm, and there's something profoundly spiritual about the experience. So we've just arrived at this place here where we're looking down like into this pit, right? And then when you look down and you're trying to see like into it, but then I'm gonna get Juan to blow, and you notice that the whole thing is water, actually. And that actually is the reflection from the roof. To deepen the experience, Juan also organized for us to take part in a mining tour. We put on hard hats and walked through the mine, getting a sense of what life was like for the miners who once toiled here. If you're wondering why I've got this on, it's a hygiene thing because we have to share the helmets, obviously, and apparently we switched this on by turning it. But yes, I think I have the dodgy helmet or the light, because my one keeps switching on and off, but see, that works. Okay, cool. Oh, maybe not. In the pitch black, feeling the cool damp air, the narrow tunnels and the echoing spaces, it gave a real appreciation for the courage and resilience required to work in such a hazardous environment.
Take this one.
¿Qué pasó, mineros? ¡Uno! Casi perdí.
I finished up my time in Zipaquirá at a cafe having lunch with Juan Pablo and his parents. And Juan, if you're watching this, I just want to say thank you so much to you and your beautiful family for taking me in and showing me your town. You are such a good friend to me, and as well as that, your parents just radiate warmth. Your mother's so lovely, and your father has a great sense of humor. And I came to Zipaquirá looking forward to catching up with you, but I left with memories that I will always cherish. Next, I headed to the Colombian department of Boyaca, which on average is one of Colombia's highest altitude departments. There, I would meet with Janet, who was a student of mine in my very first English language class in Sydney in 2007. I had already thought about traveling to Boyaca to visit some of the little villages there, but she also reached out to me on social media when she saw that I was traveling in Colombia and made sure that I stayed not just in Boyaca for a couple of days, but with her and her lovely family as well. So I doubled back to Bogotá. I met her in Bogotá, and then we traveled together to Doitama, which is a small city in the Boyaca highlands. Boyaca is a very rural department known for its farms, dairy products, and mountain scenery and quaint villages. On the way, we passed this wild Taj Mahal replica. Yep, that's right. It belonged to a small theme park in the town of Briqueño. We arrived in Doitama in the evening and were greeted by the sight of local people dancing cumbia in the town square, as well as beautiful light projections on the Doitama Cathedral. Later that night, we headed out to Pueblito Boyacense, a miniature village whose houses resemble those from iconic towns around the department. It was so atmospheric. All the houses were covered in fairy lights, and each one hosted a small business selling handicrafts or local treats. It was here in Boyaca that I really started to get a sense of the Christmas season building. I got a taste of it in Eje Cafetero with Candles Day and Candles Night, and then again in Bogotá with the church service that Sunday morning up on top of Monserrate. But it was here in Boyaca that the Christmas spirit truly struck me. There was something about the atmosphere, the traditions, and the way the community came together that made it feel unmistakably festive. The next morning, Janet and her mother prepared arepas de mote for breakfast, made from maize, which is dehusked using wood ash. Like I said, there are so many different types of arepas in Colombia. We then headed to Boyaca's departmental capital, Tunja, where we met her sister, who took us out for a delightful lunch in a forested valley. Boyaca is like this. It's so different to the stereotypical image of Colombia that so many outsiders hold. Janet spent much of the day driving us through some seriously picturesque scenery, and we eventually made it to Villa de Leyva, one of the most iconic villages in Colombia. Villa de Leyva is picture perfect, with white stucco houses, a beautiful cathedral overlooking the main square, cobblestone laneways, and all sorts of gastronomic treats. There's even a chocolate museum and a cafe famous for its milhojas, the Colombian take on the French dessert millefeuille, layered with generous amounts of dulce de leche. A calorific dream, and I absolutely loved it.
This is good.
As the sun set, the village began to sparkle. Little by little, the Christmas lights flickered on, and soon Villa de Leyva was resplendent in all its enchanting festive glory. Unfortunately, I remember feeling quite under the weather that night, and I didn't probably appreciate it as much as I would have liked. I did certainly have a great time, and it was one of the most vivid nights that I had there in Colombia, but I do remember feeling a bit green. That night, I stayed in Janet's family home in Gachantiva, which is a village on the top of a mountain with spectacular views across the surrounding hills and forested valleys. And when I woke up, those same sweeping views were the first thing to greet me. After a light breakfast, Janet very kindly drove me to the nearby town on the main highway called Arcabuco, from where I could take a bus to Barbosa to continue on to my next destination. While we waited for the bus, Janet and I topped off the experience with one more local treat, cheese dipped in agua panela. The cheese, again, the local farmer's cheese, semi-soft and wonderfully fresh, melts slightly in the hot agua panela, a drink made from sugarcane or jaggery.
This for me is stranger than cheese with chocolate.
Right.
This is more strange.
What?
For me, yeah.
Okay, so this is the big experiment.
Here we go.
Interesting. Not bad. But you're right, this cheese is fresh cheese. When the bus finally pulled in, I said a sad goodbye to Janet and to the whole region around Boyaca, Zipaquirá, and the capital of Colombia. Janet and her family were so generous and so kind to me. And, you know, I know. I'll take it back to once again the debate between Bogotá and Medellín, that I know that Bogotá is a controversial choice, but I think when you look at my experience that I had in and around Bogotá and in Zipaquirá and Boyaca, I think it really goes a long way to explaining why I had the most amazing time there. I kept having these experiences again and again and again. You know, things like when I was feeling homesick and Juliana and I went out for that amazing dinner. When I stayed at Javi and his sister's place in Bogotá, Julie getting back in contact with me, having my birthday dinner with a bunch of friends there. You know, the hospitality shown to me in Zipaquirá by Juan, Pablo and his family. And then, of course, Janet and her family just showing me around the region of Boyaca. I love you all and I miss you all so much. But the central region of Colombia is not the only place where I experienced such mind-blowing hospitality, because what happened next took it to a whole new level. Make sure that you tune in again next time for a special Christmas edition of Latin America Diaries.